have you revised anything from the last meeting, Alan?
Alan Road, McMahon LaRue Associates, is this on?
Yep.
We hope it is anyway. We've gone full circle with this. We took the board's suggestion and we looked at the 5 foot and the 15, and we seriously looked at it, and we looked at a house design, which we've provided. And when you go through the process, it goes around full circle. And so what happened was, the owners have decided that there's one house, and that's the house that we've provided. And that house is essentially 30 feet wide. It's not going to be exactly that because the 40 feet's on a skew, and we're not using 5 foot exactly on the short side. But what we're doing is providing a 2-car garage. A 2-car garage, and I'll weigh heavily on Barry's experience as a builder. 2-car garage, and I'm showing. I'm showing our garage at 2325. A 2-car garage is at 2325. It's very, very tight, especially when we're trying to get 2 cars off the street and in the garage. And side by side, it's going to be very, very tight, opening doors and that sort of thing. Additionally, what we're showing is a entryway that it's obviously going to be a 3-0 door, and we've shown a 6-foot entryway. Well, that's pretty tight in itself because you got 1.5 feet on either side of the door to kick your shoes off or hang a coat or do whatever. So that's why we circled back on this. Also, there's going to be an elevator. It's going to be an internal elevator as opposed to 340 Lake Road, which is an external elevator. Ours is within the structure itself. I think with a house at this height, you need an elevator, but what that does is it takes up room inside the structure itself. And we're worried about wheelchair accessibility because, we don't like to think of things like that, but when I built my house 32 years ago, I did a first floor master with a big lot with open doors because I wanted wheelchair accessibility. My wife needed it, and so she used it, and we don't ever know when we're going to use it, so that the internal traffic within the first floor and second floor has to take into consideration that there's going to be an elevator inside the structure itself. We'd like to use trusses to stand the width to maximize the open space. We don't have the luxury of, as we do on 340, putting in supports and that sort of thing, because it just configures differently. So given those, and we have done a little bit of research in terms of the neighborhood character, and this configuration that we have is within the character of that neighborhood, as you can see from the various plans and homes and where those homes are situated relative to each other. Some have, in fact, a 3.5 foot minimum side setback that was granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. So there's some, we are in character with it. Now, what we were planning to do was to provide a 10-foot wide reciprocal easement for maintenance agreement down between the structures. So we're still proposing to do that so we can get from Lake Road to the shoreline of the bay. Height-wise, given some 2-foot structural rams that we're going to need, we took this drawing of the house, and that comes out to 39 feet. So we've given it a go, and we can't see how you can develop a significant house unless you use these dimensions. And fully well recognizing that you're going to have all of your ductwork is going to be in the ceiling, so we need room for that. This is a difficult build on a 40-foot wide lot, which is very, very tight. But I think it will look very, very nice, and it will be in keeping with the neighborhood. With that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Well, Corinne did some homework and came up with setbacks that were on the adjacent lots. And as she stated in the last meeting, 5 foot was pretty standard on one side, but with a little bit wider space on the other. I guess I understand where you're coming from, but we've kind of established some sort of precedent there. Myself, the reciprocal easement is a good idea, but I'll pull the board here and see what their opinions are of that, because we're looking for access, a way to get around the back of the building. But what I was hearing at the last meeting was that some of the board members were favoring shifting the house to one side and having at least 7 or 8 feet on the other. And I don't know if they've had a change of heart after, I went back there again a couple times and looked at the other houses and so on.
Well, take a look at a 2-car garage, how much space that takes up. Take a look at a reasonable entry, and how much space that takes up. And you come to the conclusion that that's where it needs to be in order to do it in a way that's befitting the neighborhood.
Except that, I guess I'm confused, the homeowners that had to replace their houses at 189, at 193, at 195, I don't remember if 203 was along that stretch or not, they had to build a house that fit, the widest one I think is 25 feet. So clearly it's doable. They all have 2-car garages. They do have, one of them does have maybe 2, has a side entrance that the main house is 25 feet and then, no, I'm sorry, the main house is 22 feet and then there's an allowance made for steps and an entryway along the side at 189. But all of those homeowners who had already lived there and then needed to replace their house had to maintain the side setbacks that were set by the board. Now, I understand there are properties further up Lake Road that are closer together. They're on the lakeside, and they're really a different neighborhood than what was established along this section of the Sandbar on the bay side.
Well,
And that's all the same data that I think we shared with you the last time, and when we were expecting this material from you earlier so that we could review it.
we don't want a side entrance.
But
And I agree with you that if you had a side entrance, you can probably go down past the garage and then go into your house in a side entrance. But that's not really a very good design.
I can understand you not wanting a side entrance, but you have a 40-foot wide lot.
Yes.
You're trying to overbuild the lot. It's out of keeping with this immediate neighborhood as established by the zoning board when the houses were being rebuilt after the tragedy. We've done a lot of work in this area to try to create lighting for the neighbors on at least one side of the house, and also to keep things within the code as much as possible. You're simply trying to put a 10-pound load into a 5-pound bag here. It's not acceptable.
We're not. House number 213, which is on the south side of the road, you'll see from those aerials, they have exactly that. And we're not trying to do that. What we're trying to do is put a significant house on the 40-foot wide lot. That's what we're trying to do with an entryway that's visible from the street and a garage that you can take the cars and actually put them in the garage and not have to park on the street or in your side yard to afford parking space.
Then you've got the wrong lot.
Is 213 a double lot?
No, it's not. They're very tight together. You've got a picture of it. I've got another one here, Josh, if you want to pass it around. And they're certainly not 10 feet apart.
All right, 213 was granted variances in the year 2013 for an east side setback of 5 feet and a west side setback of 9 feet. The builder erroneously placed the house where they did and then came back to the board in 2015 for a west side setback of 7.8 feet based on they mismeasured. But still, they had a 5 foot and a 7.8 foot setback, but that's not what was originally approved.
The house to the west is not 5. They don't have 10 feet between the houses. There's probably 7 at most. And you can see from that picture straight on that that's the case. And what we're saying is this is really the character of the neighborhood. And the area will show it.
Well, and 213 is the anomaly, isn't it?
213 is the one
There's
to the left,
there's one
and the one to the right
parcel
is very close to it.
that is biased to the right, and I believe that would be 213, and then the rest are biased to the left.
213 is to the left on that picture I just brought over. And the one to the right, as you're looking at the picture, is very close to it.
The one to the right is a double lot. Oops.
211.
Bob, I don't know if you followed this from the last meeting, but they're asking for 5 foot side setbacks because you were absent last meeting, correct? And Corinne brought up the point that all the houses were skewed to one side, so that one side setback was between 7.8 and 9 feet, not 5 on both sides. So that's what the discussion's about, actually.
Right, 211 is the double. 213, actually 213 was built before the fire, or was approved before the fire, and that one was biased in the other direction, but everything else has been, the houses have been biased to the east. And then 213 was put in the wrong place, too. But if I look at 189 and 193 and 195, those were all, they got a large setback on one side of the house and a smaller setback on the other side of the house, so that they weren't right on top of each other. And what we were trying to do is get a 15-foot gap between the houses without penalizing each homeowner on both sides of the house.
Right. Now, we understood that from the last meeting.
But nothing changed, right?
And we couldn't, or something did change. We did go through the process of looking at houses and how they were configured and that sort of thing. And so that did happen.
Okay.
And that's why we came with that. We don't want a side entrance. I think a significant house ought to be, the entryway ought to be seen from the street. And not, you have to search around the side of the house for it.
You have an opinion, Don?
We're dealing with a clean slate here. We've established a precedent with other applications. Nothing's set in concrete. I know what the applicant wants, but sometimes what we want, we can't get. We have to be flexible.
Well, we're looking at two things. We're looking at consistency, aesthetics, and then access to the bay. They could provide the access to the bay with the reciprocal easement. I think the question at hand is, when these homes are 10 feet apart, is it just going to look out of whack, out of character with the neighborhood or not? I understand what we did in the past. It was kind of nice for us because they happened one after another, and there was some momentum to the whole. Then
I remember, I was here.
I understand what the applicant is saying. It would have been nice if there was somewhat of a concession to create some more space between those houses. To change gears, the height issue, what is it, a 10-foot ceiling on the first floor? I'm seeing 13.5.
Yeah, 2 foot off from the land, it's 11 and a half. But, you know, that can go down a little bit. I was just scaling that particular drawing.
Yeah. So you're looking at 2 foot trusses to clear span that?
Yeah, because it looked like they were using a 2 foot lamb, so putting a lamb all the way across. Opening up the structure so that we have visibility of the lake and the bay and all those kinds of things. More open layout inside the structure itself.
Yeah.
So the average height is 39 feet, what's the peak height?
Oh, that would be another 3 to 4 feet above that 42.
So you're going average height on the roof?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Are there 8-foot ceilings on the second floor, I'm assuming? Or it would be
Yeah.
third floor.
Yeah, 8 foot, 9 foot ceilings maybe, because we're halfway up the peak, so it's gonna be tight.
I guess, as far as the height goes, you know, there's 2 ways to look at this. You can bring the roof down and it'll just look cheap. But the roof has a little more pitch, which is more attractive. But I don't think we should go excessive ceiling heights since you're already over the allowable height for code. In other words, if you're too high with the house, don't go with a 10-foot ceiling, go with 9-foot ceiling. Don't go with 9-foot ceiling on the second floor, go with 8-foot ceiling. In other words, try to comply.
Right.
And still have a nice house.
Yeah.
Do what you can to comply. And the same thing with the garage height. Just make it just as high as it needs to be.
Right, or 10 and a half there with a garage door and those kind of things, so that's not out of, I mean, 10 and a half is not huge, maybe half a foot bigger than needed. Again, I just scaled the drawing that was provided. Nice looking structure.
It's irrelevant to the code. You're not passing any of the standards that we need in order to grant a variance. This is what you want to have, you don't want this, you want 10-foot ceilings, you want 10 and a half foot, you want, but it doesn't meet any of the standards necessary in order for this board to grant a variance. I mean, it is substantial, it is completely self-created, it's detriment to the neighbors as the board is established. You're just not there, and by ignoring and what this board asked you to do and basically coming back in and saying this is what we want to do, you've put yourself in a position where I would vote to deny this in a New York minute.
Well, we haven't done any of those things that you mentioned. We did circle around on it, but when we had a design that is pretty hard to argue with, it's not self-created, the lot's 40 feet wide. The only reason we created it is we bought it. Don't buy the lot, that's what you're saying.
You have a lot.
Don't have an entry.
You have a lot, build a house that fits on the lot.
Don't have an entry that looks good from the street, and don't have a double-car garage.
You're,
More or less a trailer that you're gonna put on a lot, that's gonna have just show a garage, and you walk down a path and into the side. I'm sorry, but that's where we are.
not at all. because the other neighbors have been able to work within these guidelines. You simply haven't even bothered to try.
We have bothered to try.
No, you have not. You went around in a loop and came back in and said, we want to do what we want to do. 10-foot ceilings, 10.5 foot in the garage. This is not.
Let me ask you this, Al. If you reduce the garage width to 22, which is kind of a standard garage, I know all the rooms in the house become 2 feet less, and you could still have the front. Could you reduce that by 2 feet and still have a decent plan?
To 21 and a half?
Well, you're showing 24 on the garage and 6 feet on the
Yeah,
entry.
20, actually, I'm showing, I couldn't get 24, 23 and a quarter. So I'd be 21 and a quarter.
I guess, I'm listening to everybody on the board, and I respect all their opinions. And we're looking for something, some effort to comply. I know you're not gonna comply, you need variances to build a house, but we need some concession on the height and the width in order to make it palatable to this board.
Yeah, I'm struggling with trying to fit 2 cars next to each other in a garage and still be able to open the doors up. That's the struggle. So I guess I could talk with the owners that own the property and ask them if that's something they can do.
I mean, our standard garage on a house is 22 feet. On a standard house, 22 is a typical garage. Some are 21,
Outside to
21 and a
outside?
half, but 22 outside to outside.
I said I rely on you, and I will.
But, yeah, but what I'm hearing, myself, I like your reciprocal easement, but what I'm hearing from the other members of the board are that they need to see some sort of concession to try, even though you can't comply exactly like the other homes, they want to see some kind of concession they want to see effort to comply.
Well, it's not just the effort, it's that it's not the effort, it's that there are variances that have been established in the neighborhood that say that this is what we're doing here because basically this is essentially level ground at this point.
Right.
And so that's what was done back in 2013 and forward. And I make all the effort you want, comply with what was done previously, or I will vote to deny.
I'm looking at the map, and if you were able to make those houses narrower on opposite sides, you could wind up with close to 15 feet between the houses, which is what we've looked for in the past. You'd already be 18 feet from the house to the east.
Here we'd be 22 feet, we'd be 13 feet between the houses. We'd add a foot and a quarter to it. So we'd be 13 feet between the houses. And we can skip on the height of the ceilings a little bit and bring that down to some other number. And we're just trying to build a house that's nice from the street, not trying to, that's the long and short of it.
You have to build a house that allows us to meet the standards. It doesn't matter if it looks nice from the street. It has to meet the standards for us to grant you a variance.
And I've shown with the overhead views where that's not the case.
The board would disagree.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what overhead views are you referring to? That we got a lot of information
The
today.
photographs that came around showing the overhead view of all the structures and how they're situated with each other.
I don't think they should, I think they took one at a time.
We should have gotten a packet a week ago of everything to look at. So this is the overhead views of the houses along this stretch, and then there's this one that is
So
the
you
overhead
received a different one
views.
than I did?
Yes.
Each one is individual.
So I have one that is the homes from 42 to 68,
Mine
Which
is
is-
from,
And you've got the area that we're actually
193
looking at.
to 213.
And then is there more?
16, 30, and 34.
16,
You're making a real hash of this.
It's difficult to see your point when we don't have all of the information that you've presented. It's on our tablet that we received right now, but I'm flipping through a lot of different views, and at the end of the day, we've already, the people that lived there originally, that lost their houses, asked for larger footprints when they came back to rebuild, and the board denied it and forced them into the sizes that are reflected on the map and on the table and in the minutes. So I'm struggling with, I tell the people at 189 or 193 whose house and possessions they lost, that, yeah, I understand you wanted 5 feet and we told you you had to have 10, but don't worry about that, this is different. I'm struggling to see what the difference is. To Eric's point, it's a blank sheet of paper.
No, they don't apply.
That's why everybody's house that you, I'm sorry to interrupt,
Please stand up.
Mr. Chairman,
What, step up to the mic?
but, I'm sorry. My name's John Kashani, I'm one of the applicants here with Nell. Every one of the glorious houses that this board approved and put efforts in is currently in violation. They've all received a letter from the DEC. FEMA has imposed new regulations. We gave building permits to construct, half a dozen houses there? They're all in violation. We are coming up with a plan that will conform with the new regs, and quite frankly, a 2-car garage at 24 feet, I know we're less than 24 feet, and a front entrance, I don't see how anything else can happen. We have no basement. We don't have a crawl space. Most of the other houses do. I understand, have to fill in their basements. They'll probably be coming to look for an addition on the side of their houses to store their furnaces and their hot water heaters, washer and dryers, and whatever other implements are in the basement. That's what's different today than what you've seen in the past. I also owned a house at 34 Lake Road. Not self-imposed. We tore it down. The new buyer came in and got the standard variance, 3.5 feet on each side. This is waterfront development. Same contiguous zoning. Don't tell me one neighborhood's different than another neighborhood when you're in waterfront development in contiguous zoning. You can't say you can do it and he can't, because you're on this side of the road and you're down the road and you live over here closer to a restaurant. And I don't understand this. The precedent has clearly been set. Check your records, it's 3.5 feet. And we're coming in asking for 5, not 3.5. But check. The precedent is 3.5 feet. So we're not asking for anything more, we're asking for less. And we are needing to conform with the new FEMA regs that have suddenly been dropped on us to say, we have to build a garage. We can't build a separate garage. It just absolutely wouldn't work. Incidentally, just 3 houses down, and I know we didn't talk about it. Unfortunately, those pages got passed out. It was just a packet I brought of 6 pages, each a different page, clearly showing 3, 4 houses down from my lot. Yeah, somebody's house burned and it went down, and they rebuilt. And there's a garage on the lot line. I don't know who has the page. To character the neighborhood, do you know most of those homes, other than those that were fortunate enough to be able to get a lot and a half, Town of Webster did sell a lot, the single lot, to either neighbor. So they no longer had to have a 40-foot lot. They got 60. Another gentleman bought 2 lots, he has 80. Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility there. You know, I've developed and built the houses at the Bluffs. Not a a bad-looking neighborhood, high assessments. Those houses are 5 feet from the lot lines. Do we all know that? We were allowed zoning to build a house 5 feet from the line, and then 10 feet on the other line. The difference over there versus where we are, the lots were in excess of 100 feet wide. And guess what? It's waterfront property. People aren't buying their property so they can have big side yards. They're buying their property so they can have a view from inside the house. Outside's nice for 3 months here in upstate New York. The rest of the time we're in our houses. Isn't that where we want to be reasonable and considerate to anybody that owns and lives in a home? I think, I apologized last time because I didn't provide a plan to Al. I just thought, well, I remember he got 3.5 feet, she got 3.5 feet, that guy got 5 feet, and then one side on a lot line. They're in the pictures. I have the data. So if anybody wants to suggest that we've somehow invented a new program, it hasn't happened. And I hope this board is reasonable enough to take what I just said into consideration as you go forward and debate whether 5 feet on each side is appropriate.
Well, part of the problem is we asked for the data, and we asked for the data to be completed in a package so that the board could review it a week ago. Delivered a week ago so that the board could review it. That didn't happen. So you're saying that these things are there, but Ms. Volo has put together a package and an Excel spreadsheet that shows what was granted, and that disagrees with what you've just said.
Well, maybe Ms. Volo can do a further packet of all the properties that have been
Excuse
built within the
me,
last 2 years.
you requested
And
to bring this and you said it would. It is not commensurate on this board to present your case.
Okay, I'll tell you what.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, let's, thanks.
I make a motion to deny without prejudice. Second.
We have a motion to deny and a second.
In my view, the applicants made absolutely no effort to conform to the requirements of the board and to give the board something that we can hang the standards on and work with the standards. And under the circumstances and given what we've just heard, I don't see anything in particular that would allow me to think that the applicants were going to move forward in good faith. I don't see a reason to rehear this thing until the applicants have had a lot of time to think about what's going on and come up with a plan that matches what's been done in the rest of this neighborhood. This is exasperating. I don't want to waste any more time on it right now.
I'll tell you what, to deny without prejudice, second, and vote on that, Charlie, I have to consult with you on this. That ends their ability to apply for this variance for a year? Is that correct?
Well, a denial, you say without prejudice, Eric, as opposed to denying with prejudice.
Right.
Prejudice with prejudice would be
Move it
denial.
out a year.
Move them out a year.
Well, okay.
Is this something you've done? Is this something you've done in the past? Is
Yes,
this
we
without
have done
prejudice?
it. This basically means that this package is unacceptable to the board and has to
But
be redone.
they could reapply under the, I'm guessing that if this is what you've been doing, this is
Right.
that a denial without prejudice would mean they could reapply for the same relief, but they would have to come back, and I don't know how the board, I don't know what the standard is for the board.
They'll have to reapply and they'll have to show some effort and some data to back up what's being said.
So I guess the denial is, just so I understand, the denial without prejudice is you're permitting them to come back within a year, basically. As opposed to a denial with prejudice, which would be a year. Okay.
My point of view is I would rather continue the discussion rather than shut the door on it, but I'm one member.
Chairman, point of order.
Further.
There's a motion made.
You're right, but
So,
yeah.
so we have to vote on it.
You have to vote on the motion.
Can we say one more thing?
Well,
Chairman Rao?
you're beyond that. The motion's been made and seconded. The board will act on it first.
Well,
But do we need to have a public, or
I,
public comments, or no?
Well, not on this motion.
Okay.
I mean, I think that the point that for this motion, I think it's a motion to discuss, right? And that's all, it's up to the board now, right? You brought it back to the board.
yeah, my opinion is we didn't discuss after the fact, but now that a motion's been made, we're pretty much seconded. We have to follow through with it. Okay, well,
The motion could be withdrawn.
Right, but unless it's
The
with.
motion couldn't be withdrawn.
And both the mover and the second would
Okay.
have to.
this is my experience. When conversations get heated, things are said and things are done sometimes out of emotion instead of reason. So I would like this, I think you understand where the board's coming from, but if we vote on this, if it's not withdrawn, that shuts the door on your, the application for another year.
Is granted.
If it's granted, if it's granted. If it doesn't, if the motion gets voted down, then you're free to move forward. But now the motion's been made, you want to stick with your motion?
Well,
Yes.
In that case, if the motion passes because it's without prejudice, then the applicant can turn around and apply right away again. But it sounds like the board would really like to see a complete package and
Right, that's basically what I'm
All the
trying to do at this
reasons.
point, is force a reapplication with all of the understanding that these things will be done. And I do not want to table this again because it's just gonna come back around full circle, and we're going to be sitting here discussing this all over again as to why they want this and they want that, but they won't consider what's been done previously. That's why I want denial without prejudice.
Chairman, we've had multiple zoning requests and variance requests on every lot that was developed and redeveloped along that strip. I mean, they're long, they're narrow, and every applicant has come before the board and said what he wanted and what they needed and what they had to have, and had an original design. And every single request, I think we've asked for concessions on side setbacks, rear setbacks, height, etc. And every applicant up to now has complied with some of the concessions that this board has asked for. So I understand Mr. Snyder's exacerbation, but coming before the board after something is tabled and not having significant changes to the design or the variance request, I think is unacceptable.
So you second? Motion.
I second.
You second? Call vote.
Okay, hold on, I'm writing down because I didn't know. Okay, Mr. Snyder,
Aye.
Mr. Denoto.
Aye.
Mrs. Bolo,
aye.
Mr. Hauser,
Aye.
Mr. Barone.
Yay. All right, so you have a right to reapply this, your application as presented was denied. But you have a right to reapply with modification. Might I suggest if you come back, Al, show the height, the floors, and the reason the building has to be that tall, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
That was for 181, and I think at this point we want to withdraw 185.
That would be reasonable.
Well,
Oh, you're this one, oh, that's right, I'm sorry, yeah, never mind, I had them mixed up. Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, I had them mixed up.
now,
Well, basically, you put together a new package and reapply, you could be back in 2 weeks.
yeah, I would, so, seeing that the way this first application went, you want to table the next application, Brett, or do you want to, that's up to you.
How do you want to proceed?
Well, since it's so grueling, I don't see any reason to proceed. I think the thing to do is, and Mr. Schneider wisely requested more data, and he feels we didn't bring enough data. I think that the application should come in with more data showing what the precedent has been, not just in a small, unique area, but in the whole waterfront development strip of Lake Road, which will tell a much different story than an isolated group of 4 or 5 houses.
That would be most useful.
Jeff?
Can I
It's
request,
not unreasonable to ask for the data.
I'll tell you what, your application is the one that was next up, so if you want, why don't you step up to the mic if you have something to say, because they won't pick it up for the record from over there. They can't hear it.
You know what, he's representing just 11 of them. I'm not sure what you would do.
John, why don't you just request a tabling of your application?
Yeah. All right, so I think for this application, we should request a table, and I think both in those folks' behalf and mine, I think clearly there's some more data that can be brought forward.
Oh, that would be
Within
good.
a couple of weeks.
Okay,
Thank you.
And I think it'll
makes
make
good
the board
sense.
much more comfortable with what the past has been along that entire strip.
As long as we can meet the standards, that's what we need to do.
You know, I understand the standards, and again, what we are facing as the first applicants coming before your board is a whole new set of rules. And I'm sure the board is all familiar. And, you know, maybe Mr. LaRue can begin to explain the 251 elevation, and everything in a home has to be at that level and up.
Well,
That's what's
unfortunately, due to COVID, we haven't been able to attend any of the continuing education. So if you've got some new information regarding that as well, that would be useful
Okay, and
too. This
yes,
is news to me.
You have
The other thing we need, if we get that data ahead of time, so we could look at it and study a little bit, that
And I don't know,
would help a lot.
is 2 weeks reasonable, or would you?
Unfortunately, they were denied.
Right. So they have to reapply then.
Yeah.
So, we got 2 houses.
It'll be 4 weeks if they have to reapply now, 4 weeks, by the time they advertise and everything.
And could they reapply within that same period?
I didn't have as big of.
Too late.
Well, it's unfortunately, it's too late because a motion's been made and passed.
Obviously, there was a misunderstanding here, even whose lot is, I think you mistake on whose lot we were on. I mean, did you think you were voting on John's lot or my lot?
No, 181.
Yes, but whose lot did you think it was?
Well, John was at the table podium.
Certainly, I hope there wouldn't have been a difference.
No, I think the board would have had the same conclusion.
It had nothing to do with that, I just made an assumption.
Yeah.
Right, so, obviously you want to present both of these on the same evening, so it's probably going to be 2 meetings from now on.
It'll be the 27th of October, so you'd have to have their information and whatever the cutoff date would be for the 27th.
I'll promise to do whatever I can do to provide more data to support the
Please.
application. And then the board can decide. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
So, let me make a formal motion to table to October 27th. You're requesting the table till October 27th?
Yes.
Maybe that'll give you time to regroup with the other lot as well, all right? So the applicants made a motion to table to October 27th, all in favor?
That was for 185?
Right,
Okay, thank you. Lake Road.
okay. All right, good night.
Thank you.
Okay.